There's a senile old man who thinks he won at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Nobody told him yet that he's almost done at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Show is now a lame duck. Biden's out of luck at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He's pretty much screwed after Tuesday night at the junction.
Midterm junction.
The GOP will say go and fly a kite at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He won't pass a bill, 'cause we've had our fill at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Hey there, Sleepy Joe, he's a moving kind of slow at the junction. The mid, you know, the thing. Come on, man. There's a senile old man who thinks he won at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Nobody told him yet that he's almost done at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Show is now a lame duck. Biden's out of luck at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He's pretty much screwed after Tuesday night at the junction.
Midterm junction.
The GOP will say go and fly a kite at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He won't pass a bill, 'cause we've had our fill at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Hey there, Sleepy Joe, he's a moving kind of slow at the junction. The mid, you know, the thing. Come on, man. There's a senile old man who thinks he won at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Nobody told him yet that he's almost done at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Show is now a lame duck. Biden's out of luck at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He's pretty much screwed after Tuesday night at the junction.
Midterm junction.
The GOP will say go and fly a kite at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He won't pass a bill, 'cause we've had our fill at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Hey there, Sleepy Joe, he's a moving kind of slow at the junction. The mid, you know, the thing. Come on, man. There's a senile old man who thinks he won at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Nobody told him yet that he's almost done at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Show is now a lame duck. Biden's out of luck at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He's pretty much screwed after Tuesday night at the junction.
Midterm junction.
The GOP will say go and fly a kite at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He won't pass a bill, 'cause we've had our fill at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Hey there, Sleepy Joe, he's a moving kind of slow at the junction. The mid, you know, the thing.
Oh, and welcome to Very Welter Radio. Thank you to Jim Gossett Comedy for sharing that song parody with us. I had to turn your microphone off because you were drumming when I
Oh.
brought you in, James. So I had to
you do, right?
turn you down. Yes. So we're going to start off with the guest. So let's get to it. I'm Mary Walter. This is James Rabick. James, my producer for a long time. A really good friend and work husband, and we kind of don't necessarily align politically. So I thought it'd be fun to have him join me here on the podcast. So he is here. He was not here last week though. So Christine Flowers sat in the seat for him.
She's great. I shared that. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she did a good job. So I want to add. Oh, he just went away. I don't know where he went. Huh. He was just there looking at me, and now he's gone. I want to add Hans von Spakovsky in here, but I don't know where he went. It's dark. I think we lost him. Well, when we get him back, Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Institute will be joining us. Heritage Foundation, excuse me, not institute. It is a foundation, not an institute. And Hans is a great guy. I got to know Hans when I was working down in DC because I worked every holiday. Because you get the day off. You got Christmas Day off. You got Thanksgiving Day off. But if I was in New Jersey, then, what was I going to do? Right. So here he is. He's over here now. Here he is. He's gone again. He's frozen. Hans has a connection issue. Oh, no. All right. Well, maybe Hans will. I'm just going to text him now and tell him you're frozen. No, you're frozen. He's moving again. Hans, do we have you?
Can you all hear me?
I can see him. I can hear you, but we don't see. There you are. I see your face now. You're frozen. Poor Hans. Well, Hans tries to work it out. I don't know why, but he's frozen. It must be an internet connection. But I got to know Hans really well when I was working down in DC, because on holidays, Hans would come in, especially over Christmas. And
if you can hear me, I'm not hearing anything from you.
Hans, hold on. Let me just tell him we can hear him. Hey, IT department, Doug, here comes the IT department. And low key bop, it says, or I think it's low key bop or it's monkey bop or whatever, says, good evening to everyone. The IT department's going to come and call Hans.
I'm not hearing anything.
And he's going to, here's my phone, call him and see if you can help him.
No, just have it disconnect.
He's disconnected twice. Just call him. Oh, now you can hear us? All right, call him. Just call him. At the top.
I understand, Mary. The little thing is not there.
I have to help the IT department sometimes.
Oh.
So Hans, your phone's ringing. You can answer your phone. I don't know. Yep, there he goes. He's answering his phone. I could see him looking down.
Hey,
okay.
Yeah.
What are you, Hans? It's Doug. Hello, by the way. What are you connecting?
All right, so you can hear the conversation.
I'm actually hearing you guys on the.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear him?
I can hear him, but he's frozen. Like he's frozen, and then he's back, and then he's frozen, and then
I now have.
So at least audio is coming through. But are you connected? Like I said,
I'm just gonna remove.
Planet.
I'm sorry. I'm just gonna remove him from the stream just real quick while we figure this out, because I didn't want it to be too chaotic. But anyway, so that's how I know Hans, and we became really good friends. And his wife is amazing, and Hans is a phenomenal baker. Oh, Doug, I think I got him. There you are. And he's gone again. So that's how I got to know Hans. So let's talk a little bit about the midterms. And some people are here. Al, by the way, our friend Al is out of the hospital. He's home. Nice. So yay, happy about that. Ron is here. Bill is here. Tina's here. Hello, Tina. And let's talk a little bit about the midterms. All right.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit. So what did you think? What was your impression?
Well, I'm not going to be popular here, and I'm sure I'm not going to be popular here. But at least one of my favorite congressmen, Boyce Franklin Biondo, who retired a couple of years ago as congressman, voiced a sentiment that I feel is important, which is Trump is stealing the soul of your party. And
see, that's not an unpopular sentiment to me, but I don't think this had anything to. I really don't think this was a referendum on Trump.
A little bit. I do think
Why?
because I do think there's that sentiment of the left that doesn't understand how anybody would want him to run again. Like even Frank said it. Like, he's going to be 80. At what point are we saying, like, is this the thing we've been trying to not have? Is these crazy old people taking over the party and running the thing? Are we trying to get some fresh, younger blood in here? Some people who have some similar policy mentality.
You mean Ron DeSantis?
Popular. Did I say Ron DeSantis? That's a terrible thing. Of
That's
course I mean Ron DeSantis. Yeah.
I wish I would hope that Trump doesn't run and that Ron DeSantis runs. That's what I would hope for. That's what I want. But
Right.
I didn't view this election as a referendum on pro or for Trump because this was about states. This was about, so how did people vote for Fetterman in Pennsylvania? If you don't want senile old men in there anymore, with senile
Right.
young men are okay. That doesn't make any sense to me. The people in Pennsylvania, I think something like 78% of them said the country's heading in the wrong direction. So they elected this guy who's left of Biden? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't think Trump had a damn thing to do with what happened in Pennsylvania. I have no idea what the hell happened in Pennsylvania. And what's going to, I'm going to say it again, mark my words, within a year, he's out of that office and his wife is in. And so the Democrats can say she's the first illegal immigrant to serve in the Senate. Is he ready?
You bet.
Okay, she's going to bring you back on the
Ready? I'm bringing him on now. There's Hans. Yay!
right.
We
That
got
work?
it.
Hey, welcome.
Good.
Yay, Hans. Welcome to the party.
Thanks.
Hans is the manager of the Election Law Initiative, senior legal fellow at the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. And you can catch a lot of his pieces that he writes in the Daily Wire. Thank you for putting a jacket on for us. James put a sweatshirt on. James like Fetterman. James is Listener Fetterman.
Well, if I liked Fetterman, I'd have a hoodie on, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yes, you're much classier than that, Hans. So James and I were just talking, and James, and I just want your opinion on this. Go ahead, James. Tell him what you said about this midterm.
I mean, I think the first part that I said, obviously, I do think there's some holdover, leftover, very much, people on the left and definitely some people on the right at this point that are very nervous about Trump in the party. There's obviously a base of him who's popular still, but there's clearly, and just from a guy who works in this kind of radio and hears this, just people talking. I mean, I think he's the sort of, I don't know, elephant in the room, I think, in the party right now, where I think there's, I'm going to lean toward DeSantis because that's the kind of guy in my mind who, similar in a background, similar maybe in policy, not coming with all the baggage, not coming with all the problems. I mean, obviously abortion, I think, was also they made that a giant issue. I'm sure.
So what do you think played into this, Hans? Is it because of Trump? Was Trump the reason why the Republicans didn't have the red wave?
Well, look, I actually think folks are not realizing or understanding something. I know that they were hoping for this huge red wave, but actually, if you break this down across the country, actually, I think the Republicans did pretty well. What you find is that in states where they won big. I mean, take DeSantis in Florida. Remember, Donald Trump won Florida in 2020 by 3 percentage points. DeSantis won by 19 percentage points. Yes, they did not win in a lot of the blue states, particularly governor's races, but boy, they came close. They haven't come that close in those states in a very long time. And look at some of the House district congressional seat races they won in New York and New Jersey. Solid blue states. So I actually think I think they actually did pretty well.
It's interesting you bring that up because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, Hans, as I was watching the returns, and I keep watching them because we're still getting returns,
right?
Because counting's hard, and I noticed a lot of them were less. The difference between the Democrat candidate and the Republican candidate in states where Democrats won, you noticed it was a percentage point or less, sometimes 2 or less, but so many of them were 0.6 of a point, 1.5 percentage points. It was very, very close to your point. So what does that say?
Well, I tell you the one thing that ought to worry folks which is that, look, control of the House now may be dependent on what, a dozen congressional seats in California, right? All of which are too close to count. Again, that's astonishing in California, which has a super majority of Democrats in the state legislature. The reason that's concerning is because California, according to a scorecard that we put together at the Heritage Foundation, is the 49th worst state in the country in terms of not having good security and integrity in their election process. Not only that, but Nevada, right next door, control of the Senate, may come down to that U.S. Senate race. And guess what is the 50th state in the country when it comes to bad security in their elections? Nevada.
Oof.
Yeah. But let me ask you one quick question. Are there enough outstanding seats to give it the victory to the Democrats? Because they're at 193 and the Republicans are at 211. The Republicans, only need 17 seats. Not even. So they need 7 seats to get to 218, right? 218 is the number.
Well, I
so are
would
there
hope
enough
so.
outstanding seats?
Yeah, I think so. But look, again, talking about well-run elections and incompetence and intentionally bad elections. Florida, right? Very large state. Finished their counting Tuesday night. We knew who had won. Florida, Nevada, counting is still going on. All kinds of problems in Maricopa County, Arizona, again, which tells you how incompetent they are and how many of the rules that they have set up. For example, encouraging all these people to vote by mail, which takes much longer to process, to open, to count, all of that is very concerning. By the way, the Pennsylvania race also shows one of the big problems with this huge push in this country for early voting, for mail-in voting. Think how many people, a huge number of the folks who voted in Pennsylvania had already voted by the time that debate happened. That debate in which the Lieutenant Governor, Fetterman, gave a horrible performance, so bad that I think most people looking at it would wonder whether he is capable, medically capable of holding that job. But anybody who was concerned about that, they already voted. There's nothing they could do about it. They can't pull their vote back.
So here's the thing. First of all, Roger lives in Pennsylvania, and I don't know if you could see this on the screen. Vegetable lasagna is now my senator. Lasagna won because Trump endorsed Ozback, and he goes, and we're back to Trump derangement syndrome. Right. So, but here's the thing when it comes to early voting, because that's one of the things I noticed in Arizona. Maricopa County is saying that all these people, and Kerry Lake has said that all these people who got ballots filled them out instead of putting them in a drop box because they don't trust the drop boxes. They don't trust mailing them back. They deposited them. They brought them to the polling place and dropped them off. If you can bring it to the polling place, why the hell don't you just vote on the machine?
Yeah, I don't get that either. And I tell you, states need to be doing everything they can to discourage people from voting early and using absentee ballots. Look, I don't dispute you need absentee ballots for people who are too sick or too disabled to make it to the polling place. But there are so many reasons why we should encourage people to vote inside a polling place. And one of the biggest being that, look, absentee ballots, mail-in ballots are the only kind of ballots that are voted outside the supervision of election officials and outside the observation of poll watchers. So you don't know, you don't have the kind of security you have with in-person voting. And it's just a bad trend in this country that we are going that way.
How did this happen? When did this start? Like was this all since the pandemic? Because it seems to me the pandemic was the Trojan horse that allowed all this, and it just came flying out of this, that everybody gets a ballot mailed to their home now. Everybody can vote early. And when it comes to voting early, may I just say, if you vote early, if you vote in October before the candidates have even debated, and then you regret your vote, well, you know what? Too bad, so sad, you're a moron. And I honestly think we shouldn't let stupid people vote. I truly believe that stupid people should not be allowed to vote. And if, like maybe a little test when they get to the polls. Hans and I have had this conversation before, and he laughs at me.
So
But I just think that, we should ask you, who are the two candidates running? And if you can't name the two candidates, you need to go home, look it up, come back and try again. I don't think that that's a high bar, discriminatory in any way, shape, or form. But I just don't feel sorry for people who voted before debates and then were shocked that Fetterman can't put a sentence together. How did you not know that? If you're ignorant and you cast a ballot and regret it, oh well.
Right. Well, look, and there are other problems in Pennsylvania also. I assume you all have seen the video that Project Veritas has released, in which they saw people inside polling places campaigning for the Democratic Party, telling folks to vote for the Democrats, showing posters, campaign posters right by the door going into the polling place. And where was the U.S. Justice Department, right? They made this big deal about going to places like Florida and Missouri. They should have had a lot of people in Philadelphia, which has, unfortunately, a long history of election corruption.
Mhm.
And it was only, 2-3 months ago that a former Democratic congressman, Michael Ozzie Myers, pleaded guilty to almost a dozen felony counts of doing what? Bribing poll managers in Philadelphia to stuff ballot boxes with fraudulent ballots. The Justice Department, they didn't need to be in Florida or Missouri. They needed to be in Philadelphia. And were they? Why? They sure weren't in those polling places where Project Veritas was.
Where were the Republican poll watchers, though?
Well, I don't know the extent of that. I do know that the RNC, I think, put on a bigger poll watching program than they've ever done before. I think one of their problems in Philadelphia is actually finding enough people to go into these heavily Democratic precincts, particularly because they're often met with great hostility.
Suppression. James, did you want to ask anything?
I was going to say, can we talk about Keith's comment? Because I think I've always agreed with Keith's comment. I can't believe it's not a national holiday at this point.
What do you think, Hans? Because I have thoughts on this.
I don't think it would make. Look, if they want to do that, fine. But for folks who think that that's going to somehow increase turnout, that's not going to happen. And the reason being that, look, particularly these days when most states have early voting for weeks before election day, so people have plenty of time to vote. And the U.S. Census Bureau actually does surveys after federal elections, and they do this interesting survey where they go and they ask people who didn't vote and who didn't even register to vote, why didn't you do that? And the number of people who say, well, I just couldn't get to a polling place is like a microcosm, a tiny percentage. The vast majority of folks say, well, I didn't vote because I'm not interested in politics. I don't like the candidates, or I don't think it'll make any difference in my lives. Making it a national holiday isn't going to change that. That's a cultural issue that you have to fix. And like I said, I don't have a problem with a national holiday, but it's not going to increase turnout.
But I have a problem with the national holiday because who are the people that get national holidays off? Government workers, right? Bank employees, the union employees. They're the ones that get the national holidays off. That it only gives the Democrats an edge, right? Because do doctors get the day off? Or no. I mean, I cannot tell you how many holidays have you worked because you work in radio, right? Right. All.
Yeah.
So it's teachers, it's government workers, it's bank employees, it's Wall Street, it's the same usual suspects who will get a day off. It's not fair, to the guys what about the small business owner who owns a bagel store? Is he going to close so his employees can go vote? No, of course he's not going to. He can't afford to. So I think it sounds great, but no.
No, I think that's a very good point, Mary. And I think you're actually right about that.
Thank
I do
you.
think Hans is right too about this being I'm pointing at Hans over here and he's really over there. um,
I'm to
yeah,
the right. I'm to
yeah,
the
you're on
right of you.
exactly.
Okay.
But voting itself, I think, is a cultural problem. And
Yeah.
I just talked to a veteran friend of mine who, like me, like libertarian, some left, some right, that kind of guy, a vet. And we were talking about how another liberal friend of mine talking about the same thing. I know liberals that are afraid to put out a flag because they think it's going to somehow associate them with Trump or the Republican Party or whatever, or freedom or some kind of thing that it like when you talk about like cultural problems in the country, those almost the same problem, right? And it's a sense the same problem. There's this real image problem with politics and voting in general. Just that whole idea of being patriotic and doing your duty, right? Just doing the thing that you're supposed to responsibly do.
Look, I think you're right about that, but what I would tell you, look, it's not just that, but I think we today are almost in a Cold War in this country because we are deeply, deeply divided on really important issues, and the divisions and some of the violence we've seen, that kind of fear that you're talking about. Look, that's what it was like in America in the 1850s when we were deeply divided about slavery. And I think there are many issues today, whether it's gun rights and the Second Amendment to abortion, where I don't remember the last time the country was this deeply divided. I think it was before the Civil War.
So James, let me ask you, your friend who's, more liberal, but doesn't want to put a flag out, who are they afraid of violence from?
Again, I don't know if it's violence or just the image problem, right? Like,
right. So they
I can't wear an American flag hat because I vote left. So if I wear an American flag hat, people will think I lean right. And those kind of feelings to me are insane and crazy to think that you can't in any way put out a flag because you are now associated with a whole political party. But those people don't want to feel that way. They feel like within their friends, their the pressure of life or whatever, you're going to be associated a way that you don't want to be associated. And to think that association in America is that bad is troublesome to me. Because again, I'm not a fan of Trump, but I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I'll talk about what he did good, what I don't like, and we can talk about him all day like human beings. Some people are really nervous to even be associated with that is bothers me.
But my point is it's the left who has demonized the flag. It's the left who wants to get rid of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
It's the people that he votes for who make him feel like he can't wear the hat with the flag on it or fly the flag outside. And I think the irony of that is delicious.
Right. It is, if you think about it. Yeah, it is. Right.
All right. So Ron has a question, Hans. Ron says, since 2020, what have we fixed and what has been ignored? How have we or they broken more than they fixed?
It depends on what state you're in. Okay. Many states took the 2020 election as a sign that they needed to improve things. And so a whole group of states, mostly red states, actually put in big election reform packages. Their state legislatures did. I mean, how can we forget Joe Biden and Stacey Abrams in Georgia claiming that the reforms that Georgia put in were Jim Crow 2.0? And so they improved things. And I'll give you the states did a lot of things, but I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, in Georgia, in Texas, both states had voter ID laws, but the voter ID laws only applied to in-person voting, which didn't do any good in the 2020 election when so many people were voting by mail. So both states took their ID laws and stretched them to apply to absentee ballots. So when you want to get an absentee ballot in Georgia, when you request one, you have to either send them a photocopy of your ID or write in the serial number of your driver's license or your your non-driver's license voter ID card. Or if you don't have any of that, then the last 4 digits of your social security number. That's not going to completely stop absentee ballot fraud, but it's going to make it tougher to commit. A lot of states also banned Zuck bucks. Remember, that was a big factor in the 2020 election. I think Philly got like $10 million. And what that in essence was the liberals, big donors giving money to all these election offices in big urban areas, heavily Democratic votes. They, in essence, moved the Get Out the Vote campaign of the Democratic Party into local election offices. Look, it was a very clever idea because it wasn't illegal. Well, I think about 12.5 states banned Zuck bucks. That includes, again, places like Florida, Georgia, Texas, and other states. So those are good changes. But look, if you're in California, you're in New York, they didn't improve things, and things there are bad. They don't clean up their voter list. They don't have ID laws, and they don't do anything to try to verify that when people register to vote, for example, they're actually U.S. citizens.
Right. So then if the blue states allow things like that, New Jersey does the same thing. New Jersey is ridiculous because, you know, Murphy wants to be California of the East, you know, and so people voted for him because yay. The red states made it harder to cheat securing their elections. The blue states make it super easy to cheat. That benefits them. So who's the idiot here?
Well, the only way you could change that is if you try to nationalize the election process, but that's not a good idea either, because the Democrats tried to do that the past 2 years, and the bill that they dropped, H.R. 1, was a horrible bill that would have, for example, banned all voter ID laws. For everything good that one side might be able to do at a national level, the other side can do bad things and force them across the entire country. With a state-by-state system, they can't do that. And yeah, some states are going to be bad, like New Jersey and New York and California, but a lot of other states are going to have good, secure laws for honest elections.
Right. John says, I love my Trump flag and most people love it. And he said, libtards look the other way. I hate that word. I don't like name calling. I don't like derogatory names for your opponent. I don't like when Biden stands up there and calls us names, and I just don't like that, but that's what he wrote. So I'm reading it because it's on Getter, so that's what he wrote. Let's see. James, do you have any questions? Because I have a bunch more, but if you don't, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so what's next for the uncalled races? We have Senate races still not called in Arizona, Nevada, Alaska, and Georgia. We talked about Arizona. Per Arizona law, the mail-in ballots had to be received by county officials by 7 o'clock on election night. Each of the ballots must go through a signature verification process before they're counted. And they say that's the largest factor contributing to the delay in election results. And it could take days for all the ballots to be processed. Of course, Maricopa County, as you noted, is the worst one of all. It's taken them 18 hours. The last update we got was 18 hours, and they added less than 3,200 votes to the count around 1 o'clock this afternoon. Why is it so slow in Arizona? Why can Florida do it in a day? Why can the entire country of France do it in a day? Arizona has fewer people than France, and they have fewer citizens than Florida, but it's going to take possibly a week for Arizona. Why can Florida do it and Arizona can't? Is it the signature verification? Does Florida not verify signatures?
No, it's that's not the issue. What happened after the 2000 election, after the 2000 presidential election, Florida said, look, we don't want to be the laughing stock of the country again.
Right.
And they made a lot of changes in their election procedures and their election laws. And they went from a very problematic state to today having some of the best, not only the best laws and regulations, but the best administrative procedures. They're competent. Maricopa County, why are we surprised? Think about all the problems they had in the 2020 election. And think about the fact that election officials there, they should have been eager to figure out what the problems were so they could fix them. Instead, when the legislature said, we want to audit you, what did the election officials do? They fought the audit. They resisted the audit. They didn't want an audit looking at their possible misconduct and incompetence. And so did they fix any of the problems they had before? Well, they obviously didn't, because now they're having the same problems again.
Right. But it benefits them. And, Katie Hobbs is the Secretary of State for the state of Arizona. She's running the election that's deciding whether she's going to be the governor. I mean, is that a loophole? Maybe that's an asterisk for the next one, that maybe they should change that, like, if you're running, you can't be head of the election if you're running in it.
Well, what you have to do if you're going to do that is you got to step aside. Okay. You got to step aside. And look, the best example of that is Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. He was the Secretary of State of Georgia when he first ran for governor, and he held a press conference and said, I am stepping aside from being Secretary of State. Other folks are going to handle this. I am not going to have anything to do with the running of the election while I'm running for governor. That's what you have to do if you're the Secretary of State and you're running for higher office.
Roger asked a good question. He asked, do pollsters have to be a certain distance from the entrance?
That's going to depend on the laws of the state. Every state has a law that says you can't do electioneering within a certain distance of the polling place and within a certain distance of the voters who are in line. I think they usually make an exception for people who are not electioneering but are acting as pollsters.
Okay. So no electioneering versus pollsters. Okay.
Right. I mean, look, it's one thing if they're asking you, they're doing exit polling, they say, well, who did you vote for, when they're asking people who have left the polling place. It's another thing, which is illegal, if they're going up to folks waiting in line and saying, who are you going to vote for? We want you to vote for this particular candidate. That's illegal.
Gotcha.
Right.
Jerry says, I fly my Let's Go Brandon flag high and proud. I live across the street from a Democrat city council member. He can pound sand.
So, can I take this part of that comment?
Yes.
So, I have a real funny thing about this, right? Because you and I have talked about this about the past. Well, I've had friends on my Facebook. We've had debates and things, do debates. Mary and I can debate, jokingly say the craziest stuff to each other, but her and I are being competitive and having fun because we're friends. It's something you said earlier, how scary the temperatures in the country, where I do think there is a very real anger on both sides about the other side in a way that's I've never seen before. I've always had friends on both sides. I've always had people who we didn't agree politically. It's never been an issue as much as I see people I know over the years who were never those people either turn to those people or run really far from it and are really nervous about it. I think I am. I'm real nervous about how that temperature is. And I find that he can fly. You don't like the president, make fun of the president. I've always made fun of presidents and politicians. That's great. But the fact that there's other people on either side that go, you made fun of this guy, you're a terrible human. It's scary.
Well, part of the problem is, look, so many folks in the media eye, and particularly politicians, have lost all sense of responsibility and are making outrageous statements. The latest one, look, Stacey Abrams, as you know, just lost that race in Georgia, and yet she actually said on the media, she accused the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and Brian Kemp. She said that they had sent out contracts to white supremacists to purge the voter rolls. That is nuts. That is something that she made up as a fantasy, and yet she's saying that the person who was just the major candidate for governor says something that is fabricated like that. I mean, that is insane that would happen. And think how many potentially uninformed voters she may have scared in the state who might actually believe something so ridiculous.
Well, actually, the other way, did you see the stat about African Americans, left-leaning African Americans voting for Kemp, having some vote for him for the job he's doing in the state? So that would be you're blind to a stat that's showing that that's not, at least, I mean, no, I'm not saying their thing isn't true because I don't believe. You get my point. I'm just saying, you're ignoring a stat, too, that's showing that, people have some confidence in him.
Right. Well, listen, she did not do herself any good when, because of many things that she said, Major League Baseball moved the All-Star game out of Atlanta. Because it's small businesses inside Atlanta, many of which are African American owned, that were hurt big time by that game being moved, and they did not appreciate her doing that.
Yep, 100%. In your piece, oh, by the way, Jerry, who made the comment about his flag, my friend John is on Getter, and he said, "I love Jerry," because I can't get the Getter comments up on YouTube. And if you're going to be listening to this after the show on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, it's just the audio. You can go if you want to see. We've gotten a ton of comments tonight that we're putting up on the screen. If you want to see those, just go to YouTube and just search for Mary Walter Radio, and you can watch the podcast. You can see all the comments that are being made as we go through the show. Hans, you have a piece in the Daily Wire called "The Latest Election Myth Pushed by the Left," and I thought that plays off of what you were just talking about with Stacey Abrams, and how she's scaring people. Jerry says Stacey Abrams, the same dummy who claims that a fetal heartbeat is a manufactured noise made up by white doctors to take control of a woman's body. Yeah, I think Stacey, I think the train to crazy town has been boarded by her. But let's talk about the latest threat that they are now trying to scare people with. And you say that's with that the threat of violence against poll workers. Are they trying to get people to not be poll workers? Are they trying to scare people not to be poll watchers?
Yeah, the RNC apparently, from what I've read, put on a really big program this year to repeat nationally what they did in Virginia last year. As you know, Republicans won all top 3 offices, won the legislature back in Virginia, at least the House side of the General Assembly. And part of that is because they put on the biggest program to recruit people to be both poll workers in polling places and to be poll watchers. They'd never done this before, and the RNC did this nationally. This apparently was perceived as such a threat by liberals that in the past month or two before this election, all of a sudden, all of these articles started appearing claiming that having observers in polling places was a threat to democracy, and that there was this rising tide of violence and threats of violence against election officials. And this was bought into by the major media like CNN and others who covered it. The U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, which is controlled by Democrats, actually held a hearing on this horrible threat to all these election officials all over the country. The Justice Department, remember the task force that Merrick Garland formed over school board parents potentially being domestic terrorists? Well, last year they formed a election threats task force that included the FBI, the National Security Division, the Department of Homeland Security, to deal with this horrible threat, right? Well, in August, a press conference was held at the Justice Department, got almost no attention by the news media. After a year of running this task force, do you know how many complaints they received? Keep in mind, there are 750,000 election officials in the U.S. The Justice Department task force got 1,000 complaints from election officials. They only found that 11% were even worth opening an investigation of. And you know how many ended up where they actually found a real threat of violence or violence that they're prosecuting? 5.
I know because I read it.
5. Okay. That is statistically insignificant. And that tells you that this whole myth that they're creating, that there's, all these threats to election workers all over the country, it was totally made up. It does not exist.
I really thought that was going to end up on the most dangerous jobs in the world, too. Wow.
Right. Now that these days, that's being a coal miner.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought lumberjack was number 1. I thought lumberjack was lumberjack, but coal miner's got to be up there.
Yeah.
And you cannot be claustrophobic and be a coal miner, so I can never be a coal miner. So I have one more election-related question for you, Hans. And then if you want to stay with us, if we have time to do some other things, you're more than welcome to stay and hang with us. If you don't want to, I will not be insulted. Breitbart has a piece, and they say Republicans have won nearly 6 million more votes nationwide in races for the House but have flipped relatively few seats. According to Cook, as of this morning, Republicans won about 52.3% of the vote compared to 46.2% of the vote that the Democrats won. Republicans lead by 6.1%, which is better than their average in the general congressional ballot polls, which the party led by 2.5% in the Real Clear Politics average before the election. But Republicans have only managed to flip 9 seats thus far. Why is that? If they're getting such a large percentage of the vote, why have they only flipped 9 seats?
Well, a lot of that has to do with redistricting, because remember, we just went through the redistricting process based on the 2020 census. And so it depends on how state legislatures drew up those lines. And keep in mind that we found out in May of this year that the Census Bureau actually admitted it had made big, significant mistakes
Shocking.
in the census count. And according to the census itself, they said that they undercounted 6 states, particularly all of them red states with one exception. And the undercount was so severe that Florida actually was cheated out of 2 additional congressional seats. Texas was cheated out of an additional Republican seat, would have been a Republican seat, and 8 states were overcounted. All of them blue states with one exception, including New York. They would have lost. The situation today would be very different because in this election, what should have happened is there should have been 3 more, at least, Republican seats, and several of blue states should have had fewer congressional seats. But because of the census mistakes, that didn't happen.
Isn't it weird how whenever these mistakes are made, whether it's with the census, whether it's with censoring on Facebook and Twitter and everything, it always goes one way? Have you ever noticed these mistakes always happen one way?
Right.
But can you imagine this happening 40 years ago and not the whole country being angry, right? You remember when, like, at some point, just the fact that you're a politician, they caught you lying in a big way, everybody was angry? And now we're really like a team-oriented angry, which is, I mean, everybody should be angry at that. It shouldn't be about gaining seats in a house and losing seats in a house. It should be about accurate counting of a census. The government can't count people. I'm going to trust them with the nuclear codes. I mean, I'm being facetious, but you got my point. Like,
yeah, but we're really split on this. I mean, look, keep in mind too. Remember, Trump wanted to do something which makes perfect sense, which was to add back a citizenship question on the census, so we would know how many aliens are there in the country. And what happened? The left, blue states, went berserk and took that case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to prevent us from having an accurate census. That tells you the division we have in this country.
Yeah. See, and I think part of the problem is 40 years ago, everyone would know this story because it would be covered in the news. Now it's not covered in the news. Nobody knows about it. And so it's not covered because the media 40 years ago was just reporting the news. Now it is an arm of one party. Now it's used as a propaganda arm for one party. And I think that furthers the division because people on the right are like, well, of course, it's always against us. We were talking about the mistakes. The mistakes are always against us. And we're always supposed to go, oh, sorry, okay, we'll forgive you again. And they keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think it was James who commented on here. Jerry says, you're right, counting is hard. James says here, I just got to scroll up. Americans want faith and trust in the integrity of the election process. Some do. But he was saying that the reason you see the division is we're tired of walking backwards. You know, one side is tired of always being for, here it is. The left's pushed too far and we're tired of walking backwards. And I think he's right. I think that the left has pushed too hard and they've gone too far. And because of that, you see the right finally saying enough is enough. You're not going to push us anymore. And that's what I think gave rise to Trump. I think the country was just ripe at that time where, I mean, we have a president who, if you don't agree with him, he calls you an idiot. He calls you stupid. You're a semi-fascist, whatever the hell that means. Mega MAGA is dangerous. We're a threat to democracy. So how do you expect the country to come together when the president is sitting there vilifying and making an enemy out of one half of this country and calling them names and things that are dangerously close to make people, I don't know, run over somebody with their car because they're a fascist, as we know happened and got very little press.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say real quick. But are we pretending that Trump didn't also say terrible things about politicians and people disagree with him and tweet
about
crazy stuff out?
politicians? He
None of
never
it's
called
good.
the American people horrible names, and never said half the country. Never said those people were dangerous because they disagreed with him. He never
I'm saying
villainized the people.
the temperature of politicians being unchecked and saying things that are like what Biden is saying. And look, plenty on the left do it. I'm just saying maybe we have a lot of politicians who say mouthy things that probably should not say mouthy things. That's a problem in this country. Trump wasn't immune to it, is my point.
Agree, but I don't know if, and I don't know, I'm sure James is a very big fan of history, and I know Hans, you are as well. But look at the battle between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They called each other's wives whores and everything else. It was way worse than it is now. But what they didn't do was go after the American people. They didn't call the American people names. They went after each other. The politicians went after each other. So to be shocked that Trump called other politicians names, it's been happening since the 1600s in this country.
He's vilified the left.
But
plenty of times vilified the left.
He vilified the media. He vilified the politicians. He never got up there and said, if you don't disagree with me, those people outside, oh, they're fascists, they're Nazis, they're this, they're that. He never did that. And I think that's the difference. Hans, am I wrong? You could disagree with me.
Look, no, I don't think you're necessarily wrong. And I don't like that kind of behavior among politicians. But I got to tell you, what scares me more is the way leftists seem to believe that it's okay to use the power of government to go after their political enemies.
Yeah.
And look, we just had Biden say that Elon Musk taking over Twitter, in which what has Musk been doing? He's been ending their censorship, right? He's been ending their censorship, and Biden says that makes him a national security threat. And look at the way, again, the Justice Department has done things like consider parents showing up at school board meetings complaining about the propaganda being fed to their children as domestic terrorists. There's so many abuses of their authority going on. We have whistleblowers at the FBI, one after another, talking about how political decision-making has been going on at the FBI in deciding whether to investigate and prosecute some individuals and not going after others because of their politics. That is something that ought to scare every American. I don't care if they're on the left or the right side of the political aisle, because that is very, very dangerous.
That's 100%. And what side do they go after? They always seem to only go after one side. And I think the people on the right we see it, we know it's happening. And I think that's where you see this anger coming from, because you can either sit back and let them keep it's becoming political persecution. How many people are sitting in the deplorable jail in DC having their rights totally trampled over for years now, right?
Right.
How many of them? And nobody, well, they stormed the Capitol. Okay, that doesn't mean that they have no constitutional rights. I mean, there were grandmas who went to jail because they walked through a door being held open by a Capitol police officer and took pictures inside, but they were supporting Trump. So therefore they have to be punished. It's like the Chinese who give warnings, like they come and take your neighbor, just so you know, that type of thing. I agree with Hans 100%. I think that that is happening, and that's happening on the left, and it comes from the top down. Now, I think Obama started it. It got very bad under Obama, and now Biden's ramped it up, and they're not even hiding it anymore. And those people undermined a sitting president of the United States because he wasn't the right party. And that's really scary to me. So Anyway, so Hans, if you want to hang, we've got like 10 minutes left. We're going to talk about some things, some other things that aren't necessarily election oriented, but you're more than welcome to hang with us if you would like, or you may go to your lovely wife.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer, but I was up really, really late Tuesday night.
Oh, I worked until I was on the air Tuesday night, Wednesday morning till 3 a.m. I finished my show at 3, and you really can't fall asleep right away.
No.
And so I wound up falling asleep probably about 4-ish, and my husband's alarm went off at 4:30. And I was cold, so he put the fireplace on in the bedroom, but we had forgotten that one of the cats had dropped some food down the fireplace when he was sitting on it. And I thought the house was on fire because it stunk so god awfully bad. So then I had to get up, turn the fireplace off, and then I had to get up and open the door because it actually hurt my nostrils. The smell of cat food being incinerated was so awful.
Okay, I don't have a story like that. So
that's because you don't have 3 cats. And he took a piece of food up on there, and I saw him do it, and I forgot to get it out. And Doug pulled it out, and it was like a piece of charcoal. It was so incinerated. It was a little piece of charcoal.
All right, well, I'm going to get off. Thank you so much for having me, and have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too. Please tell Susan we said hello. Take care. Thank you, Hans. All right. I love him. I absolutely adore Hans. He is amazing and wonderful. So just very quickly here, one election related item. I don't know if you saw this, and I'm shocked that this came out of Montana of all places, which is one of the reasons we're looking at Idaho instead of Montana. But Montana voters rejected something called the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, and it would have required medical professionals to perform life-saving medical care on infants who survive abortions or are born prematurely. Now, when a baby is born prematurely, we spend millions of dollars to save that baby's life. Well, now if the parents go, yeah, I know the baby's alive now, born premature, and the baby's alive, but you know what? We're not digging it. They could just let the baby die. I don't know. I was taught that's infanticide. I don't know. But I guess if the baby's born early, technically it's before the date that their due date. So it's still considered abortion just outside the womb.
I don't know that any girls would agree with that, but I'd be fascinated to hear one that does.
The measure would not have prevented Montana residents from receiving abortions, but would have been required the medical care to be provided to infants born alive as a result of a natural or induced labor, a failed abortion, or a cesarean section. It failed by around 2,000 votes. The legislation acknowledged that an infant born alive after an attempted abortion is a legal person and would have granted them the rights to medical care after birth. It also wanted to penalize doctors if they failed to treat infants as living persons, which I thought infants were living persons, right? And take the required necessary actions to preserve the life of a born alive infant. The bill defined evidence of life as an infant who breathes, has a beating heart, and definite movements of voluntary muscles. Without proper legal protection, newly born infants who have survived abortions have been denied appropriate life-saving or life-sustaining medical care and treatment and have been left to die. This is like an actual problem.
So what states allow abortions that late? That the infant is in a savable infant state?
Well, New Jersey will allow you abortion up until delivery. New Jersey has no definitive time at which you can't get an abortion.
8.5 weeks, you can walk in and go, I'm out.
Yeah, you can. The day before you deliver, you could say, ridiculous. You know what? I know, but this is what they want. They don't want any restrictions on abortion. According to
weird politicians, because I can't imagine a woman I know that would be okay with that. I honestly don't. What
about the people who voted for this?
Well, it could be the people who voted for this, right? But I mean, usually all these things, and we know that these things are wrapped in everybody's side of how they want you to vote, right? So it's the fear thing that makes these kind of ads so good, right? You're not talking about taking an abortion. You're talking about not killing infants. It's a big. I'm sure there's a separation. When you talk to logical people, rational people, I'm sure most of them feel the same way. I don't think there's that much division in the world on that. I'm sure there are people on extremes on both ends. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure.
Of course.
You know, there's obviously you're raped, you're fine, keep that thing, and obviously there's the ones who think going to birth is fine too, which, you know, both are insane. But
yeah. Let's see. Low Key Bop over here says Christopher Titus did a stand-up comic routine that argues that late-term abortion should extend to a 21-year-old. A great argument ad absurdum. I remember that show. Christopher Titus had a show in the 90s.
Yeah.
Funniest. Do you remember that show?
I do.
I forget what it was called.
So
funny.
Oh God, it's on the tip of my tongue too.
And his brother was Dave. His brother was Dave, and Dave would always have to say moo at cows when they were driving. I go, hey, Dave, cow. And Dave would go, moo. It's the stupidest stuff you remember. The things that are in your brain that you remember are so funny.
I know.
All right. So Joe Biden lied again. Last week, he told an audience in New Mexico, he was there at Central New Mexico Community College, you know, about the student debt transfer plan. You know, like, I'm going to take your debt and give it to some poor guy who's a truck driver right now who never went to college, and he's going to pay it off for you. He told them, he was talking about the time he spent with Xi Jinping of China. I spent more time with Xi Jinping of China than any world leader has. When I was vice president, when I was out of office for 4 years, and I was a professor and now president. He claims to have been, after leaving the White House, Joe Biden was given the title Benjamin Franklin Presidential Practice Professor at the University of Pennsylvania. That's like Fetterman being given a professorship, but okay, University of Pennsylvania, way to go.
Good stuff.
And that's an Ivy League school. Snopes determined in April of 2022 that the role was honorary. While Biden held the honorary post, he made about $900,000. And you want to know why tuition's so expensive? Elizabeth Warren made something like over $400,000 and taught like 2 classes. Joe Biden made $900,000, and it was an honorary role. Biden held the honorary post. He gave roughly a dozen lectures and talks. He never taught a full semester's class. So he never taught a full semester course. He did not conduct any research, and nor did he have any administrative responsibilities.
Great. He's a real winner.
Yeah, but he keeps telling everybody that I was a professor.
Yeah. I'm a famous drummer.
Yeah. And I'm 6 feet tall. So the Washington Post, you know, they got, once Trump was gone, they got rid of their presidential lie check because they only do it for Republican presidents. They don't keep they don't have a presidential lie counter for Democrat presidents. They get rid of it for them, and they only do it for Republicans. They rated his discussion about I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any other head of state. I traveled 17,000 miles with him. And he said that in San Diego. And Glenn Kessler said that the Post has fact-checked this claim several times before, and the president has said it over 20 times. They keep fact-checking him. He keeps saying it. So when Trump was president, the Washington Post created a new rating because, you know, Trump was such a liar. He was such a horrible liar. They couldn't keep track of all his lies. It's a bottomless Pinocchio because they have 4 Pinocchios, and they have the bottomless Pinocchio. And the bottomless Pinocchio is for claims that have been given 3 Pinocchios and had been repeated at least 20 times. So Biden got a bottomless Pinocchio. Let's see. They also fact-checked the president's claim that seniors were getting an increase in their Social Security check for the first time in 10 years, thanks to Joe Biden. The White House also included that claim in a tweet. Now, that tweet was fact-checked and had a little disclaimer on it saying fact-check and said why it was wrong. They deleted that tweet. It said the analysis by the Washington Post says the reason Social Security payments are going up is because Social Security benefits under a law passed in 1972 are adjusted every year to keep pace with inflation. And because inflation's at record highs, they got a huge bump because Joe Biden. So thank you, Joe Biden. They also fact-checked him about, he keeps claiming that gas was over $5 a gallon when he took office. And he got fact-checked on that one as well by the Washington Post. That was also a tweet, which was also fact-checked on Twitter and got that little thing. He also repeated a claim about the Second Amendment a couple times. The Washington Post gave him 4 Pinocchios for it in 2021. In June, he keeps keep saying it. The Second Amendment was never absolute. You couldn't buy a cannon when the Second Amendment was passed. You couldn't go out and purchase a lot of weapons. Well, turns out a lot of the cannons used in the Revolutionary War were actually owned by private citizens. So, so yes, they had cannons or us. You could go buy.
As if he doesn't know that through the 20s, they were trying to sell, like Tommy guns to civilians because the military wouldn't buy them. So they're like, hey, you people want to buy these expensive firearms that throw lots of bullets around? The people said, yes. You could buy a lot of stuff for a long time.
Here's another one from James. Biden also mentioned when he spoke to the guy that created insulin, the guy died 2 years before Biden was even born. There's that one.
Hey, Mary,
Roger said gas was $2.39. Yeah.
You do remember how many times I've said these words since the beginning of you knowing me. The minute we allow our politicians to lie with impunity, just to lie as much as they want, and there's no consequences, we're not going to have a country. And I feel like I haven't been wrong.
And I'm going to tell you,
you can say anything and nobody cares. They just don't. Nobody even cares. It's not. Nobody cares.
James, I just watched a piece on George Washington.
Yeah.
When George Washington was running for president, I guess it was the second time.
Yeah.
There was a group of people in his own administration who wanted him out because they thought he was an egomaniac, blah, blah. A lot of the same things that they say about Trump. Mm-hmm. Although George Washington is literally the father of our country. Mm-hmm. They were taking money from whatever office it was that they had, and they were printing a newspaper that was anti-George Washington. So they were embezzling money from the government.
Great stuff.
And they were criticizing the guy in office, right? So, and then again, I go back to Jefferson and Adams. They lied about each other all the time.
Yeah.
So to say that that's the end of our government.
But think of the degree, though, that we've allowed them to lie compared to what you're talking about. And by the way, they had duels back then, too, and shot each other. So again, we're not talking about the rosiest time on the planet. But think of what our country's overcome over time, right? You would assume in a day and age when we should expect more and we have the ability to see it, right, in a way that you can't deny. And we still are like,
right.
It's okay. I can't think that's good for your democracy when you just don't care. When everybody thinks that all of these people are scumbags. Most of us think Washington's a sewer, right?
No.
That's what Trump ran on. I mean,
100%.
we always all think it. That can't be good.
Well, we're going to have to sort it out. Let's see. Matt Doug 48 says, old Joe must step down by next year. His puppet strings are broken. And Low Key Bop replied, the strings are intact. They're just tangled. All right. One last story, and then we're going to let you go. We are out of here. We spent a lot of time with Hans, and I absolutely loved it. I adore Hans. He's just such a great guy and a really good guest. There was a piece on CNN yesterday. And I guess it's on CNN.com because it was written by Nicole Terry. I guess it's Nicole. People spell their names because they got to be different. I have no clue what this person's name is. Terry Ellis and Justin Gamble. And in this piece, they assert that that the lottery system is racist. Here's their reasoning. Here's what they say. The largest Powerball jackpot lottery ticket ever was recently sold in Altadena, California. One person won. Now, when I heard how big the, billions of dollars, I was like, I really hope a couple of people win to really spread the wealth around, right?
Sure.
It could be life-changing money for 10 people. It could be life-changing money for 20 people, right? But one person getting $2 billion, I'm like, really? I don't know. It's a little picky.
Well,
but,
one now, but
one, yeah. Well, they know. No, they know. We should have the lottery run the election. I've heard several people say this. They knew how many tickets were sold. They knew how many winners there were. They knew where the winning ticket was sold that night. So we should have them run it. They could help out Arizona. Okay, the odds were 1 in 292.2 million. On the other hand, I play like more of the scratch offs because your odds are like 1 in 4. So far, I've won a free ticket.
Yeah, I never win those either.
Nothing.
Nope.
I want a free ticket. That was it. I don't win anything. I have 3 tickets. Before I won the free ticket, I had 3 scratch offs. I won Zippo on.
Yeah.
So, researchers told CNN that despite the extremely low chance of winning, state lotteries still aggressively market the lottery and sell tickets to low-income communities at higher rates, thus misleading Americans to believe it would help them generate wealth quickly. According to the 2 writers, quote, these communities are disproportionately made up of Black and brown people. Critics say the consequences is that marginalized people will be driven into deeper debt by a system that is transferring wealth out of their communities. According to the research, lotteries are a regressive service, with low-income groups paying larger chunks of their budget on games versus their wealthier counterparts. Additionally, more money is spent on instant scratch-off games versus drawings like Powerball. The piece they wrote also highlighted how stores selling lottery tickets are more likely to be located in poor communities of every state. There's literally one that I can walk to in my town, but okay. The state money generated from the lottery sales often do not feed back into the communities, but rather into colleges and higher income school districts. CNN pointed to a report from 1999, which found that Black Americans, high school dropouts, and low-income people played the lottery on a much more frequent basis. Jonathan Cohen, who I don't know who that is, and nobody tells me who that is in this in this piece, says that the lottery often sees more players when the economy is suffering. He said for folks who, especially Black and brown Americans, maybe face discrimination in the traditional economy, while the lottery doesn't discriminate, anyone has just as terrible odds of winning. And he's right. So here's the thing. Go ahead. Well, first of all, I did win the company quiz twice on just Sean Spicer's show on Newsmax. So woot woot for me.
Very nice.
I cannot be on tomorrow, though, to defend my crown. I have to go to a wake. So unfortunately, I will not be able to defend my crown tomorrow night. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes.
So I find it both racist and demeaning to somehow assume that Black and brown people don't understand the concept of odds and can't make a decision that they want to take a low budget chance at a lot of money, where maybe disproportionately very rich by their token white Americans maybe don't choose to play the lottery because they're already rich and have money. The entire argument falls apart pretty quick when you're just assuming it's almost like they're saying Black and brown people don't understand what the lottery is or what taking a chance on that is.
These are people who assume that Black and brown people are too stupid to have an ID, right?
Right.
They're very racist. The bottom line for the left is they're incredibly racist at their heart, right? They did spring from the KKK, so I guess the roots go deep. But they assume that these people, they need the government to help them. They're too stupid. Well, here's the thing. Of course, more lottery tickets are sold when the economy's in the crapper. Why do you think I'm buying them now? Of course, right? And so if they say, okay, well, we're going to move the lottery ticket sellers out of the poorer areas and put them in the richer areas, then they would say, well, you're only giving rich people the chance to win billions of dollars because poor people can't get to the lottery, right? Then they'll say that.
Or a store and a lottery tickets because it makes the money in their bodegas or stores that they own, and it's a source of income. I don't see how even the concept of a 1999 study that you're quoting in 2023 in any basis for a thing about how this could possibly be racist.
It's 2022, but you're on a roll.
That's 23? Yeah, I know, like when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. I know.
No, it's ridiculous. But see, this is the point. They find racism everywhere they look. They're assuming that a person of color didn't win the lottery, number one, in California. We don't know who it was. We don't know who that person was, right? So they're making the assumption that it wasn't a person of color. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Black and brown people have no access to the internet, Roger says. That's another assumption they make. That's racist to have schools online. Now, do kids in the inner city have less likely? Yes, which is why we should have kept the schools open, and we shouldn't have shut these kids out because they were hurt more because wealthier people who could put their kids in private schools did put their kids into, especially Catholic schools that opened during the pandemic much more quickly than inner city schools. So they're disenfranchising the Black and brown people by forcing these kids to go to inner city schools. They won't give them school choice, right? So they won't give them the opportunity at something better. They're just racist. At the bottom of every one of their arguments, if you drill down far enough, they're racists. They assume that if you are of color, you have no ability to think for yourself, earn your own money, get a job, make decisions, etc. They have to do everything for you. And that's it. I'm done.
Yeah, it's baffling. It's baffling the amount of stuff that people will just throw out as racist. And then it makes really racist things seem not racist. Not, you know what I mean? But I mean, like, it's the boy who cried wolf syndrome and the mentality of that, like that. Like, if you keep just throwing out things that aren't racist for no good reason, or because you want to have a political end, or maybe you're just ignorant. And I don't know. Maybe whoever wrote that is just ignorant, not thinking. Like the one that thought that hiking in California was racist because disproportionately not as many Black people, I guess, hike.
Right.
But there's no, and people who hike will be like, I don't know, I see people of all shapes and colors on the trails all the time. So, I mean, it's just seemed like a really dumb, I think we talked about that article a few months ago. Like, it was this thing that came out of the LA Times. It was the dumbest article ever. Like,
I remember it.
Who could possibly print that and have any sense of credibility at all? Because, I mean, I joke about the comedian podcast I listen to, in that world, which is, of every shape and kind of person, those kind of things get made fun of real hard. Like,
of course,
it's insane for somebody to print that and then not have it be the laughing stock of the country.
Well, to your point, when everything is racist, nothing is racist. Right. I mean, I think that's kind of the way it all plays out, that if everything is racist, then literally nothing is racist. What does he say? James says no, James. I don't know what that means, but he says no, James.
Could be, I'm not sure which question, but okay. I'll take the no.
Could just be a statement. He's very good at taking the no.
I'm the bad wrestler tonight. I get it.
No, you're good. I'm glad you're back. We missed you last week.
You.
Christine was nice enough to jump in the seat on Tuesday. She did not jump in this. Oh, Tuesday and Thursday, not this past Tuesday, not Tuesday, this past Tuesday when you had your little. Everything in James's life, the man has more emergencies in his life than anybody else I know. It isn't hiking, it's water stuff. Apparently they can't swim. No, but there was a piece about hiking. And listen, I
both
understand.
are bad, by the way. So you're right. Both are bad.
Right. But I get it, because except where Joe Biden was a lifeguard, there aren't a lot of places in a city for kids to learn how to swim.
Yeah,
but that goes across for all the kids in the city, not just the Black kids, the Hispanic kids, the white kids, Chinese kids. It's all the kids.
I heard that about hockey too, and I'm like, yeah, but there's those weird stats that people run. You're like, exactly what you said. Like, I bet if you polled like just statistically people from the city that play hockey versus people that come from the suburbs where there's more access to that kind of stuff, you'll find that that's where it comes from. Now, of course, disproportionately, you're 100% right that Black people don't play a lot of hockey, but that doesn't mean the sport is racist. It means they disproportionately don't follow hockey from where they grow up, or whatever the reason is. It's not culturally part of their thing. And the ones that do and more that do, great. But it's not racist. It's just a statistic based off watching and listening preferences, like basketball or like any sport where you could probably track who watches what more and what more.
James says maybe Corn Pop was actually a good guy and trying to keep a perv away from the kids. And Ron says, also, they don't ski. Right. You don't see a lot of Hispanic and Black people skiing. Right. And I don't know why that is. It's just a thing. Okay. There are more Black people in the NBA than there are, Asians. Okay. So it is what it is. But to this comment here by Ron, we have a good friend named Ron who is of color. And this has to be back in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, that Ron, our friend of color, we were taking him skiing. And he said, well, if you're going to make me go skiing, I want a white cultural weekend. So we had a white cultural week. We listened to Jimmy Buffett. We had spaghetti and garlic bread, which is like, of course, he's had all these things, but it was just a funny thing.
Yeah, of course.
And we're like, well, why haven't you ever skied like with your family? So he goes, because Black people know it's cold out. It's like, we're not like you white people just try to put more clothes on and try to pretend it's not cold out. But he had a great time. He really enjoyed, like he really wanted to learn how to ski. But it was just funny in the way it happened because, you can't say half the stuff that we were saying to each other. You can't say that out loud now, right? But back then it was no big deal. And like when we went to his wedding, his wife is white. We went to his wedding. His father comes, we're on the dance floor, and his father comes back and goes, "Okay, white people." And he brings us all, he goes, "Follow what the black man does." And then he was going to teach us how to dance on the dance floor, right? But my God, can you imagine if they did something like that today? Oh my gosh, you can't say it out loud, but I just think I liked it better then because it was like really, we truly don't care what color you are. And so, we taught Ron how to ski, and he's gone. His brother, he took family members, and then I think his parents wound up going skiing with him. He got his parents into it and everything else. I think it's just cultural what you're exposed to. Just because I'm white doesn't mean I ski. I had never skied before I met my husband. I knew that when we started dating, I was going to have to learn how to ski because he loves to ski. So if I wanted to see him in the winter, I was going to have to learn how to ski.
Right.
But that has nothing to do with my skin color. It has everything to do with this. Is just not something my family did. We didn't ski.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Great.
Roger, wait, they don't play hockey in Harlem? They might play street hockey.
They might.
They might, but it's just like in Texas, they don't have outdoor skating rinks. Imagine that.
Right.
So anyway, so I think we've solved racism, which is a good thing. All right, we are out of here because we're over time by 15 minutes. Because we're having such a good time with Hans. The audio for this will be up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. If you are, I highly recommend you go back and look at we had so many people commenting. We were putting them up on the screen. I didn't get to read them all as we went along here, but and so one last comment from Jerry, guy I went to high school with. You didn't ski at Fernwood? No, I did not, Jerry. Fernwood was our senior class trip in the Poconos. Fernwood in the Poconos?
Yeah.
That place, like they have like the champagne glasses now and everything like that. It wasn't like that when they let high school kids go there on a senior class trip. It wasn't like that at all. I went tobogganing. We tobogganed. I ice skated, but I did not ski at Fernwood, Jerry. So no, I did not. And I think Fernwood's now closed. I'm not sure. Shockingly, the senior class trips from Bridgewater East and Bridgewater West was not their demise.
Oh.
So. So, and one last thing here from Low Key Bob says, "Hello, good night." he's pulling a Fetterman on us. So, all right, Monday I'll be on the Chris Salcedo show. So if you want to join me, please do on Newsmax TV between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. That's usually when I'm on, but it can sometimes be 4:15, but that's usually 4:30 to 5 o'clock is when I'm on there. Tuesday, we will be back here with Life with Mary Walter, which is our non-political podcast. It's so much fun. We delve into other things, everything but politics. 7:15 live on Getter and YouTube. Just look for Mary Walter Radio. It's still under that. It's not under Life with Mary Walter. It's Mary Walter Radio. And again, audio going up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just again, look for Mary Walter Radio, and we will do that. Have a great evening, everybody. James, glad to see you back. And we have a great weekend.
Yep.
And we'll see you on Tuesday. Bye.
There's a senile old man who thinks he won at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Nobody told him yet that he's almost done at the junction.
Midterm junction.
Show is now a lame duck. Biden's out of luck at the junction.
Midterm junction.
He's pretty much screwed after Tuesday night at the junction.
Midterm junction.
The GOP will say go and fly a kite at the junction.